approach to caring for one another, for supporting one another, and the challenge of correcting each other. And if you haven't figured it out, that's kind of a hard thing to do sometimes in life, is to figure out how to correct somebody that you're close to in a loving way. Like the first thing, we can all correct folks. Second level, do so according to the biblical standard. Okay, now I've got 2 levels. But to do so in a loving way sometimes is challenging for lots of reasons beyond you care about them. In fact, I would suggest, and we'll talk about it a little bit tonight, that because you care about somebody, that's what makes doing it in a loving way more challenging. Because you actually care about the tomorrow. Just correcting randomly, super easy. You're wrong, and you're done. But correcting with love, with care, it's a whole different thing. So we'll talk about that some tonight as we work through 4 or 5 primary passages and some of the related principles. Right now, let's go ahead and bow together in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time we share and study tonight. We thank you for the encouragement that is found in Christ. We thank you as we think about what it means to be a disciple and the relationships that we share. We thank you for the encouragement that is found in our relationships to each other and the pathway you have for us in life, the direction towards heaven and the holiness that surrounds a heart that is seeking you. Please forgive us of our sins, and we offer this prayer in your Son's name. Amen. So again, we're in the middle part, if you will, of this series of lessons on, as Heath Rogers titled his workbook, Portraits of Discipleship. Really just thinking through all these different words that are attached to what it means to be a disciple. And one of the things we'll talk about tonight stems in part of a text all the way back in Genesis. But before I ask you a little bit about that passage, I want you to think in your head about the last time someone who had a heart for Christ, a disciple, a Christian, came up to you when you were struggling, and how did that impact you when they showed up? Just think about it first, and if you want to share part of it, we'll have chances for that too. We sometimes think about correction in this area is entirely negative. Because our mindsets about stuff in American culture kind of predetermines that's the only kind of correction that can exist. That all correction is negative. Is that a true thing? Is being corrected mean a bad, negative thing is taking place?
It shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be. But raise your hand if it feels that way sometimes. Yeah, everyone's like, I got 2 hands and a leg up. It kind of feels that way. Here's the thing. If you're walking, as some folks are ought to do, with their phone like this, of which some folks are ought to do, and you're about to run into a tree, and someone comes beside you and says, hey, my friend, there's a tree right here. Have you corrected them? Yes, that person has been corrected. Is that a negative experience? Well, I was perfectly fine. I wasn't going to hit the tree that I didn't see. Why did I have to? That's our brain about it. We've elevated our circumstances. We believe we would have sorted it out, and we knew the tree was there. The number of times I have watched people run into things while watching their phone this close up is substantial. It's a common occurrence, especially if you watch people in large groups of people. The malls, a bunch of teenagers together, people driving their cars, like it's a pretty common thing. And I wish I could just go in the cars and say, hey, there's a car in front of you. Your phone's not the car you're driving. But I want you to think about that little light level. And imagine now that the kind of correction you need is about a more important thing. By the way, it is very important not to run into a tree. But let's think it's more important. And, for the purposes right now, It's something not necessarily wrong, but something you could be doing better, more effectively, more efficiently. Maybe someone has found a new way to do things that will save you some time. And their correction is in the realm of instruction and redirection. Is that a better feeling about it? Hey, I wish I knew how to do that a long time ago. I wouldn't have spent 10 years of my life doing this the hard way. The easy way is more efficient, and maybe it's just better. How many of you have to use the clicky-clacky computers a lot in your work still? Like you guys use computers a ton. I still use computers a lot. There are shortcuts to everything, right? You can take your mouse and you can hit Control-V, the copy-paste mechanism up at the menu, all you want. Or you can Control-V on the keyboard and it just happens. If you're using your phone on your iPhones, you guys know that you can take the little space bar and press on the space bar with your thumb and it turns your thing into a mouse. And you can move your little blinker indicator all across the text you're writing like a mouse. It's wild. Saves you time rather than having to like tap where it is exactly. That's a kind of correction. That's actual useful information that redirects the behavior. The Bible has us doing that with moral things, with godly things, with things of a far higher level of importance than mechanical stuff. And when that happens, what should be the result is a stronger relationship because, hey, that person cared about me. And they told me that, hey, you know, if I thought about it this way, a Bible passage, a principle, an idea, my faith will grow. Here's some information I didn't know before. I didn't know this thing, and now I do. And my faith has expanded. So I say all of that to go to the other corner, which is the preventative, punitive-ish, or restriction side, and think about one of the most defiant, if you will, passages in the Bible. This is from Genesis chapter 4 and verse 9. And Cain is the one speaking there. And how many of us kind of know what Cain says? Am I my brother's keeper? And implicit in his statement, and if he was Rocky, he would have said, am I my brother's keeper? Question mark. It would have been like the next step of that to really reinforce that this is a question he's asking. He's stating very clearly and distinctly, hey, you know what? I'm not. Why are you asking me about this, God? Why are you checking with me? Was it my responsibility to watch him today? By the way, if you've ever been around siblings, this is sibling behavior 101. Doesn't matter the context. Here's the balance, though. The Bible not only answers that question internally, God's response is pretty clear about it, but think about this from Galatians chapter 6 and verse 2. What does the Bible say there? It's talking about a different thing than a four-legged black bear, but the word bear begins the text. And no, it's not the right to keep and arm bears, which I think we should have. Michael, what's Galatians 6:2 say?
Bear one another's burdens, and thereby fulfill the law of Christ.
It's a pretty strong statement, right? The leap that takes place. Absolutely, there's a positive statement. Bear one another's burdens. And fulfill the law of Christ. Are there any similar-ish statements by Jesus in the New Testament talking about fulfilling or the wholeness of the law? What's that statement that he says regarding the ordinal value of the law? Like, what's the highest principle of the law?
Love.
Yeah, like love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. There's that dialogue that takes place in the Gospels, right? You know, that's basically this. The principle is the same. To love your neighbor is not just, hey, you're great. Hey, neighbor. Or ask, you know, how you doing, neighbor? Oh, I'm busy. Standard American response to how you're doing. I'm busy. That is not what is being talked about here. nor was it what Jesus is talking about in the first century either. To love your neighbor is active. It's a doing statement. Bear the burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. So I want you to think about that now and ask a hard question. Can you think in the last 3 months of a time in which either you were helping carry somebody's burden or they were carrying yours? Either of those equations are there. Start thinking about, well, what does that actually mean? What does it look like? What are some examples? They don't have to be super personal. You can be generic. You can make up people to protect the innocent or to incriminate the guilty. That's perfectly fine. But what would burden bearing look like?
Helping someone in need.
And helping them in need. What are some needs to make it specific? Bro, what you got?
My granddaughter will call me. I'm the only one that she will call, and she has 2 toddlers and she's pregnant.
Okay, that's a burden. That's a lot of work, a lot of stress.
Yeah, I just let her rant.
Some of you know my mother-in-law, Debbie. She used to worship with us here. She has always said, look, if you're driving late at night and you're feeling tired, but you got to keep driving and you need someone to talk to, you call me. And guess what? She will not fall asleep on you. I don't know how she'll figure it out, but she will stay on the phone with you as long as you need. The same thing is actually true of my oldest child, Jesse. He'll get on the phone with you if you need him to. Stay up with you. Independent of what his responsibilities are, because he knows that driving late at night is a bit of a challenge, and he wants you to stay awake and be safe. I don't want everyone to call him if you're in that circumstance, but if you needed to, those 2 folks would certainly help with that. That's practical. You see what that is? That spiritual? Absolutely. It fits in the broad basket of loving one another, of caring for one another, as well as the last time you hugged someone who was having an awful day. The last time you checked on somebody because they weren't there Sunday, or they weren't there Wednesday, or they weren't able to make it to a potluck. And you just said, hey, everything good? You all right? Need anything? They don't always have to be the house burnt down and we provided them with everything they need. In fact, the relationship seems to indicate it's far more about all the other stuff. Even though we get to the serious, important, clear other principles and concepts that kind of tie into all of this. So let's think about Cain's question here again, and then deeply kind of dig into a little bit more to how we would think about this. So we have Genesis 4:9. We've already talked about that. Let's think about Matthew 18. This is one of the bits of the text where this is taking place in a principle, at least. And Johnny, could you read 12, 13, and 14 for us?
What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountain and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish.
So I have an Apple Note that I started. Let me see if I can get the actual date for when I started this. Pretty soon after I picked up Apple devices. So that probably was around like 13, 14 years ago. And the list of the title of my little note inside Apple Notes is Lost Items. Literally means exactly what you think it is. Something I've lost somewhere, I know not where nor how, that I am now wishing I could find. Items include the glasses I left at the church building, They fell out of my pocket in the parking spot, and Trey found them. Let's see, 2 king-size pillowcases went missing. The family Christmas memory book got misplaced. These are all found stuff. Currently still have 3 items that are just gone. Don't know where they are. I'm pretty sure all 3 of them are never going to return. I think I know where one of them got lost and how it vanished from me. Now you're like, that's kind of weird that you got a lost list. Well, I know where all the stuff that I know where it is. It's the lost things I don't know. And when Jesus uses this idiom of 99 to 1, it's essentially the same thing. You know where all the ones are cared for and safe are. It's the ones that are out, that have value, that you're like, I gotta go get that. I gotta go find them. I will leave all these things that are safe and secure to go get one's soul. And sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, right? Like I said, the 3 items on the list, I'm probably never going to see them again. I kind of know where at least one of them vanished to. Probably the other 2 are similarly lost. But I want you to think over the course of your life, people who used to worship with you, any place on the planet before in your huge life past, where are they at right now? Imagine where they might be. Living people. Are they at home watching TV? Are they out doing stuff? Are they in jail? Or they don't even know where they are because they've been so removed from your life you've lost track of them? What would you be willing to do to have a 5-minute conversation with them? Where they're not just you telling them stuff that they need to hear, but they're listening. They got the volume in their head turned down, their ears are at maximum capacity, and they want to have a real conversation. How much of your stuff would you sell to have that conversation with one of them? Just pick one. Would you give all your stuff for it? Would you give 99% of your stuff for it to go get that one? And they're listening. This is not just like, hey, I'm going to go check on them, and we're going to have a little chit-chat. Like, they're really going to happen. Again, the shepherding heart that's within all of us says, yeah. And in fact, I'm going to suggest that all of us do this to the level of our ability. We're not all working in the same range of skill, in the same range of knowledge, in the same range of reach. And God doesn't expect you to reach people you've never met before. Doesn't expect you to have skills you've never developed when it comes to this shepherding concept. But you do it already. Because I want you to think about that same group of people the last time you prayed for them. By name. There's a time where you prayed for them. The last time you talked to them. You did a little bit of it. Even if it was only in your head and you were trying to figure out what to say. What do I say this time? Is there something I can say that might get them to think? Is there something I can do that might change how they see Christ in me and in them? They're all part of that same category of what am I willing to do for one. This leads to, and this is the tie-in to it, 1 John 3. Trenton, you got your text open there? Could you turn to 1 John 3 and read for us 17 and 18?
But if anyone has the world's good and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth.
John is not going to pull his punches in his little letters, right? Like he's like, let me just lay it out to you. Let me tell you what you need to hear. It's going to sting a little bit. And he says it plainly. Look, if you see one of your brothers and they need, and you don't, do you love? It's a great kind of parallel to think about the range of possibility in this big question regarding Cain's question and Christ's answer, because Cain said, in essence, no to his implied question, am I my brother's keeper? Well, clearly not, because of what you had just done, but even more so. Jesus answers yes to that question with a multitude of possibilities. Yes to the soul, yes to the body. You care for each other. One last passage in the space comes from Romans chapter 13, verses 8 through 10. Tyler, do you want to read that for us? Romans 13, 8, 9, and 10.
Oh, no, anything except to love each other, for the one who loves has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to the neighbor, therefore love is fulfilling the law.
So with all of that, all the four passages, the big concept, since you know the right answer to Cain's question, it's yes, you are your brother's keeper. What is it going to require you practically to accomplish that yes? Let me say it this way. What could it require of you?
Effort.
Effort? Action? How about everything? What are you willing to give to help someone you care deeply about? Stephen Wanda and I were talking about the substantial temperature increase over the last few days ago, and it's pretty hot outside. And then he works inside an unconditioned space. A few others work outside in the heat, also in unconditioned spaces. But what would you give to help your brother? Would you get rid of your air conditioning if you knew at home, the one that you rely on, you really like, if it could strengthen a soul of one of your fellow brethren? How long would you be able to handle no air conditioning in Georgia? How soon would you be moving to Minnesota? By the way, you need it up there too. You have to go further north to get to a point where maybe you don't need it as much. Because do we like our air conditioning? I think we do. I think it's a fair thing. But would you give it up for your brother, your sister? How about for one of your kids? Kids in the hospital needs to pay the medical bills. How much of your stuff are you selling for them? Every parent's like, I'll sell all my stuff and I'll be at the blood bank weekly if that's what it takes, right? Sell everything. Whatever. Like, if I can help them, I'll give them everything. The goal is to have that kind of love for everyone, that kind of compassion that sees them with that level of importance. It's not always easy. Do we make it on the other end of this as human beings? Do we make it easy to love us sometimes? Are we prickly and like basically porcupines in some parts of our relationship? Yeah? Do you get grumpy in the morning? How much of life is saved by caffeine? Is caffeine a life-saving liquid? I will argue that caffeine saves a lot of lives. It just kind of brings the temperament down to a better, more moderated space. Because 1 John 3 talks about closing your heart, what does a closed heart look like for a congregation? I'll give you an illustration. There's a church I know of that was looking over its budget for the year, and they were like, this parking lot, it's kind of rough, and we really need to repave our parking lot. They look at the budget there, and they're like, well, if we just canceled 3 years worth of gospel meetings, we could pay for the parking lot. Does that make sense to you from a loving standpoint of loving humanity? Like, it seems kind of like maybe there's a priority that's wrong if the parking lot becomes more important than preaching the gospel. Now, what if it was taking care of a brother who had been in the hospital? Parking lot or his medical bills? Medical bills not come first. Like, that's what a closed heart would look like. No, it's like, oh, we can't do that because we need to fix the parking lot. Otherwise, people will think we're poor. Which is implied, by the way, back when I was encountering this. I'm like, you really think that's what folks are going to judge us by, to the level that you feel like it's more important to elevate that image rather than doing what's arguably pretty right to elevate above? Because gravel's just fine. You can park in gravel. It works all the time. And if you don't want gravel, you can just put grass there. It's the South. Grass is equivalent to a parking lot for most of the southeastern part of the U.S. It's the same. Unless it's very smooth and looks like a golf course, then don't park there. Just fair warning. The text of the New Testament also includes another thing that I think is important to balance with this. And it's a way to think about the obligation side. What we actually owe each other could be defined as a debt of love. You ever paid something off, like the last payment on a thing? How good does that feel when you send in the last payment for something? It's pretty satisfying. It doesn't even matter if it's expensive. I remember paying off my very first musical instrument because that's just how you did it back in the day. You'd purchase it over time and you'd pay for it over time. Most musicians are poor. That's also probably why that's the case. But man, the last payment felt great. I don't have the instrument anymore. It got ran over. It's a flattened trombone as to a functional trombone. But I remember paying it off vividly. Do you realize that the Bible actually presents for us the idea that we are indebted to each other on the basis of our love for one another? Kind of a weird component. Look at Romans 12 and verse 10. Different translations work this passage across a couple edges. But let's see if I can pick out the ESV first. Les, you have the ESV, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and read that for us. Romans 12:10.
Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor.
I love the last clause as it's rendered there, but there's another reading of it that's important too. Does someone have like the New King James or NIV translations of it? Or are we all at ESV? I've ruined it. Everyone's using ESV now. New King James or New American Standard? What you got, New King James?
Kind of affection to one another with brotherly love and honor, giving preference to one another.
Giving preference to one another. And I can't remember the new NASB. Is it similar-ish?
Yes, is be devoted to one another in brotherly love, giving preference to one another in honor.
Yeah. There's some uniqueness to that word set that's being translated there. Sometimes we think about it, giving preference means we choose them. Absolutely true. But there's an edge to it underneath that has this, when it gets to English, level of competition. It's not exactly competition when it says outdo one another in the sense you're not like, my brain says, absolutely it's competition. This means I must outdo them. Like, that's my brain, but it's not exactly that. It's actually seeing them as more important than you, is the concept, the principle. I look at them and I think they, individual, group, and their needs are more important to me than my own. That's a Jesus principle, does that a lot. That's the same thing to like, hey, if someone takes your cloak, what's the Bible answer to that? Do you knock them out and take your cloak back? That's what America says we should do, right? What does the Bible say regarding the person who takes your cloak? Give them your tunic, your shoes, give them all your stuff. It's not how we're trained by society, and it's weird by that standard, right? But it's what Jesus teaches, what disciples can angle towards. And if we just turned it internalized and said, hey, if my brother needs my cloak, and I give him my tunic too, I get that. Jesus elevates it and twists it bigger and says, the outsider even more so. If they take your cloak, give them everything. because God's going to provide another one for you anyway, is the concept underneath it. He's still going to take care of you. You will still have what you need, even if what you have got taken from you. That's the weird part of it. But internally, love one another with brotherly affection is actually the first operative. It's not the last part of it. Love one another with brotherly affection. This is where there's a distinction between how sometimes we approach things. There's a massive difference between treating someone like a sibling and being a sibling. Treating someone like one is superficial. It's outside rather than inside. Oh yeah, you're one of us now. Not really, but we're going to pretend like it is. Oh, you're welcome here. Yeah, as long as you do everything to fit in. You do the basics. But not really, because you're not really one of us. How many of you have been part of the congregation at Eastside from, let's just say whatever we want to call the beginning of the congregation meeting? Raise your hand if that's y'all. So Michael and Kelly are early adopters, but there's probably, 3 other family units on top of that that are here tonight that would say they're from the very beginning of that endeavor. That means that the majority of folks that are here tonight are new, by every standard of what new might be. When the Bible tells us to love one another with brotherly affection, it's moving us from as to is. They are your brethren. They immediately become that. Now, is that easy to do? How many of you say things that you think are funny, but they land weird? Professional misstater, all right? How many of you say things that you believe in your mind are incredibly kind, but the minute you say them, the person looks at you like you have 3 legs and 2 heads, right? The reason that happens a lot of the times is because you just don't know each other yet, or you chose to text it rather than saying it. Texting is hard, by the way. Like, it's super hard to get tone right in text messages. Emojis don't make it better. Just for those who are emoji people, I think emojis make it worse. The little images and pictures, they make it worse. Because I don't even know what half of those things mean. Like, ooh, face. This looks like a leopard. I don't know what that means. In person, I can usually get it eventually. That's part of that challenge of moving beyond I'm connected to you to I know you. And I can say something and you understand that I care because we're family. It takes time to build that, right? That's moving from like to is, to as to they are. So again, the operative text, Romans 12:10, love one another with brotherly affection, outdo one another in showing out honor. It's continuing to push that relationship stronger. That's that second phrase's intention, that you keep improving the love that you have and use for one another. It's similar to Philippians 2:3-4. I've been picking on different folks. Bob, you want to read real quick for us? Philippians 2:3-4.
Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. That each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others.
You can actively love someone, but struggle to like them. And loving and liking are, in our minds, 2 very different things, but they are closely related. You can love someone and not like them. You can like someone but not love them at all. You can be closely connected to somebody you love, but go through a period where you really like them, and then you don't. And that could be all in one day. what is being emphasized here is a way to move past that reality and to develop a perspective that says, as a member of the body, member of a local church, of Christianity generally, I'm going to figure out how to not just tolerate other people, but actively seek their good. To seek to live in a way that makes their life better. How many of you have been cut off by a bad driver in the last week? I've driven like 5 states. The answer is yes. And this summer, there's been a couple of times where I really thought someone's lack of situational awareness meant that I was going to be the next speed bump in their life. But I was listening to some guy read a little bit on a podcast, and he quoted some other person. He says, you know what I do when that happens? I just tell myself that they need to go to the bathroom. They really need you to go to the bathroom. When they're speeding past me and cutting me off, they have eaten something that they should, in this case we can say maybe they had the lettuce at Taco Bell. Just, that's not actually probably the thing, but I've eaten a lot of Taco Bell in my life, I'm just fine. If you tell yourself that, does that change how you think about that person that's really speeding past you? Because, have you ever been in their shoes before? Where you've made a choice dietary-wise, and you're like, it's 2 minutes, it's 12 minutes to the nearest safe bathroom. I actually need it to occur in like 9 minutes. Otherwise, I'm going to have to detail my car. Listen, this is real talk. If you think of them that way, that that's their circumstances, do you pull over and let them pass? Like if you knew that about them, would you call your buddy who works for the sheriff's office and say, clear the road? This man's having a moment, and I'm on his squad. We want to make it that. If you think about them that way, you will change how you behave. The same thing, maybe even that exact thing, can help the way we think about our brethren. They come to the services that day, and they're looking like they've just been through it. Their temperament is off. They got a lot of weight in their life. Their heart looks broken. Everything about them says, man, they are ready to snap. But they're here, right? They made it to services. They showed up to worship. Remember, their load that you haven't figured out could be really heavy. It could be something very practical, as deep spiritual needs. Think of them as someone who needs every ounce of care you can provide, and then carefully apply it, which is kind of difficult. Kind of difficult to carefully apply. Here's an example of that. How many of you know somebody that you love a lot that is truly an introvert? Not just like they don't like crowds, but they really struggle with a lot of people interacting with them at once. If the group is like 5 people all talking at once, they're done. Do you know someone like that? If you're like that, you're like, he's talking about me again. You know I'm not that person, right? Like I'm the opposite of that. I actually feed off of the introverts. I feed off of all that until I pass out. That's just kind of how my brain functions. That means that some of us who are high energy have to back off the pedal a little bit when someone who isn't high energy is struggling. Because they don't need full 100% of me when their world's breaking. I'm too much. I know that. But maybe 10%. Maybe 5% from me. Or maybe someone with a better sense of quietness. Maybe less. Less is pretty chill. Less is great when it comes, like if you need someone who's chill, sorry Les, they all know your secret now. They're going to come to you a little bit more. By the way, there's a lot of us, I'll tell you this plainly, when we want advice, Les is one of the people we call. Just about stuff. Especially if it's about something that matches his experiences, I call Les. I talk to him here. That's one of the reasons I like the building here, because they get to talk to him there too. Sorry, I'm letting all the secrets out. Last secret. This is all, he's going to regret some of these things going forward. He's fine. Because we need different things. We need different people. And that's when we're seeking it. And sometimes it comes to us, I mean, to make sure that when we're the one coming, we're doing it in a way that's supportive of that larger goal. Back in the text we just read, you'll notice in verses 3 and 4, let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. That means you actually have to pay attention to your brethren and kind of know what's going on in their life. Why are you in my business? Because I care about you and I'm curious about what's going on. It's not really that complicated for my brain. But I get that sometimes people are in their business for the wrong reasons. There's a whole different set of things for that. But you got to know that what's going on in order to be supportive and encouraging. Which gets us to a passage I've referred to recently. We'll read it again here in a second. Hebrews 10:24. That passage there, quoted, says, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. The word consider means to think carefully and deliberately. Because caring for one another takes intentional thought. I've got a friend of mine who preaches up in Ohio and often works as an auctioneer and does some other stuff. And if I ever needed a professional pot stirrer, and all the way that he wants to create some chaos, I'll call him. Because I don't know what it is. He could say something that is absolutely a universal agreed truth. Such as he could say, nobody likes to pay taxes. Is that pretty fair? Is that a fairly universal statement that nobody likes to pay taxes? If he said that, 1,000 people would be agitated. I don't know what it is. He can just really rile some things up. I don't know what it is for him. I don't want that kind of circumstances, but he's got it. But sometimes he uses his power for things that aren't that good. He's messing around and being a little playful. Sometimes we do that as Christians too. We see someone who we think needs to get a little bit more involved, and we start pestering them, pushing on them. Maybe we push too hard. We think that the only way to encourage somebody is to get behind them like they're a stubborn mule and poke them. I tell you, that doesn't work. If you've never been kicked by a mule, you just haven't lived. It's not a fun experience. They are stronger than you every single time, even when they're little. It's almost like being chased for chicken by a chicken. It's a rite of passage in certain parts of the country. It's not what you think it is. Not everybody needs to be pushed. Some of us need to be pulled. Some of us just need to be reminded that, hey, the water you need is right here. It's right here. That's all we need. Or we need that reminder 17 times because we're forgetful. Where's the water again? Did you say we're getting water today? Did you put water on the list? Consider thoughtfully, carefully. That then allows us to catch up to Galatians 6:2 again, to bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. The clock says we have to stop here. So we have exhausted our time. But I want to give you two small things to think about that would kind of fit the homework-ish side of things. Number one, figure out a way to practically encourage your brethren. Something you can do and take ownership of and say, I'm going to do that. It doesn't have to be big. It just fits your talents and your opportunities. Second thing in that, once you've figured out what that is, super simple. Do that. Whatever it is. Not every single thing in the Christian relationship needs to be managed and have a system for it. You can actually just go do good. It's kind of an exciting thing to say, I'm going to go encourage folks. That's it for today. we will continue moving forward next week, thinking about, in this case, the disciples' greatness as a servant. Thanks, everybody.